Chapter 121 to 122. Akachi was sweating like a pig and nervously glancing at the empty seat of the Mizukage as he waited for the council meeting to start. He was one of the only 3 civilians in Kirigakure that managed to get onto the council due to their usefulness. Akachi was especially good when it came to getting information via his merchants, which was his reason for being on the council. He was not really the spymaster of Kirigakure. He would rather describe himself as some kind of handy informant, since his merchants were, in the end, just merchants, not spies. Then again, not even the Mizukage could afford to dismiss him, since a lot of the important intel during the war was brought to him by Akachi, rather than the ANBU or through Kirigakure's spymaster. One should never underestimate drunk merchants, and their capacity for spouting things that should stay hidden, after all. Akachi knew much. For example, he knew there was some new group moving in his field of expertise for the last few years, namely the Bairi Company. He had no proof even after years of monitoring them, but he knew they were doing exactly what he did, except on a much, much larger scale. Frankly, it scared him shitless when he thought about the intel they must gather all around the elemental nations, as one of the major international companies, in good graces of almost every daimyo. Akachi had no doubt whoever was behind Bairi knew every single move of any hidden village, before even the Kage gave the order, just by looking through their shopping list. Akachi even knew that Jiraiya the Sannin owned most brothels in the Land of Fire, under an alias, and even in different countries under different aliases. Akachi had no idea about the sheer scale of Jiraiya's brothel network, but he knew it was larger than any hidden village would be comfortable with if they knew about it. It certainly took a long time to get rid of them in the Land of Water, and they couldn't be sure all of Jiraiya's brothels were dealt with. The real list was something not many people, even in Konoha Council, knew, as it was one of Konoha's top S-class secrets. No wonder the man was the best spymaster. People talk when they are drunk while playing birds and bees. Men especially feel an unexplainable need to brag. Anyway, Akachi could get some rumors even from somewhere as far as Iwagakure, where they rumoredly wanted to use a Jinchuriki to attack Tsunagekyure's outposts. Really, how could Iwa Jonin freely talk about it in a bar was beyond Akachi. And due to knowing so much, the latest rumor was whispered to him. A rumor that made him very restless. He briefly swept his gaze through all of his fellow councilmen, and it was painfully obvious none of them knew, after all. None of them were nervous. In fact, they looked all peaceful, as if the war was no longer their problem. Finally, the door opened and the Mizukage walked in with 2 ANBU surrounding him, and the councilman stood up in respect until the Mizukage sat down in his seat. He instantly put his hat down onto a small table next to his seat, and a smoking pipe found its way into his mouth. The man was old, ready to retire, at least in the opinions of most of the councilmen, but Akachi knew it would take some years yet. Mizukage's eyes were too cold, too ruthless for him to just roll over and do as the council wished. Hello everyone. I hereby open this council session at the request of Merchant Akachi. Mr. Akachi, the stage is yours, the Mizukage said, looking irritably at the sweating merchant who gave a small, insecure laugh. I heard rumors. Akachi really had no idea how to breach the topic. Thankfully, the other councilman didn't pester him and just quietly waited. He proved his worth long ago, after all. Akachi decided to hell with it, as he straightened and cleared his throat to calm himself. I heard rumors of a new group of rogue ninja called Yozora. According to these rumors, Rei, Konan, and Mei of Kiri are members. There, I said it. Akachi thought as he flopped back into his seat with relief, ignoring how deathly silent the room went. Despite his relieved state, Akachi still had his eyes trained on the key figures that touched this information, namely the Mizukage and the resident spymaster Ichika Shu, who was in charge of the information-gathering divisions of Kirigakure. The various councilmen showed astonishment and speechless expressions the second they heard him. They didn't want to believe he was speaking the truth, since Team Downpour was the best team they had. The silence quickly passed and the room erupted into chaos. People started yelling at each other, some not believing the 3 most powerful ninja of the Kirigakure went rogue, some calling for their blood, others screaming how stupid it would be to provoke them. It was a mess. Enough, Mizukage shouted, instantly silencing the room, and turned to Ichika, who just silently enjoyed the show, sensually scratching her right forearm with the long, polished nails of her left hand. Do you have something to say about it, Joninshu? He already knew. Akachi thought in disbelief when he spotted how deceptively calm Mizukage was. Akachi just shook his head in exasperation. What else did I expect? He is Mizukage. Stupid me. I only know that some upstarts calling themselves Yozora showed up. You see, I had sadly no idea about what Mr. Akachi just informed us of. They didn't really do much yet, except for ending some small skirmishes. If they didn't show capability to go 1 versus at least 4 squads, I would not even be interested in them. The melodic and enchanting voice of the brown-haired beauty rang through the room, and Akachi scrunched his nose in distaste. Ichika Shu. She was a crafty and immoral woman, and and that was exactly why she was capable of getting a position on the council as a non-clan shinobi in Kirigakure. If there was one member on the entire council of the bloody Mist Akachi was wary of, it was the curvaceous and tempting vixen in front of him. She was the leader of the TNI department, or for clueless civilians, the Information Gathering Division. The woman had no qualms about the way of obtaining information. She would gladly fulfill any sick and deranged wishes of her target if it made him talk, as she would not shy away from inflicting the worst of tortures for the same reason. She simply had no moral limits, and that was a very scary thing in itself. That woman will be the end of Kirigakure. Akachi tried to not glare at her, causing him to lower his head. He was overly aware of the rumors spreading through the general population and noble court in the capital of how monstrous and devilish the Kekkei Genkai users supposedly are. Some described them as even less than animals. These rumors first started before the war, but that was quickly suppressed. Imagine Akachi's surprise when they started again during a time when there was nobody free enough to suppress them, causing them to spread far and wide across the entire country. Akachi knew it was Ichika's work. He just didn't have any proof, so he kept his mouth shut. The woman wouldn't mind a bloody civil war if it brought her a higher position in the proverbial pecking order of Kirigakure. She definitely didn't like the fact that 80% of the political and economical influence was in the hands of clans. Lord Mizukage, what will we do? We can't just let 2 of our S-rankers and God forbid an SS ranker to roam free. We have to do something. The new heir of the Yuki clan, chosen after Himino's death, spoke with determined eyes only for the older man from the Hozuki clan to scold him. Shut up, you young idiot. How do you want to stop them? They can deal with any hunter squad we sent after them. You know nothing of their secret mission records, you young gnat. Do be quiet when adults are talking, child. The Hozuki clan leader sneered. The Yuki heir started spluttering, but before he could start screaming murder at the Hozuki clan leader, the leader of the Swearan clan, one of the smaller but very powerful and respected clans, started speaking. I am afraid I must agree with the old and grumpy, he chuckled, making the Hozuki clan leader scoff. We really have no other option than to ignore it at the moment. He knew the other councilman wanted to interrupt, so he quickly added with a shrug, not sorry for a second to throw the Mizukage to the wolves. And besides, the Mizukage already knew long ago. The second that sentence was uttered, every set of eyes in the room intently looked at Mizukage. Surprisingly, even ANBU were not an exception. The Mizukage puffed out smoke from his mouth and sighed, mulling over how to explain so even the old idiots on the council would understand. Yes, I knew. They are missing for a few months, already alongside Ringo Amuri. He nonchalantly said, starting the second wave of protests and screams that only stopped when he released his killing intent. While it didn't faze the ninjas in the room, it was a sign their Kage wanted to speak, so they shut up due to respect rather than fear. But none of the councilmen were happy. Ringo was a major figure in the village, a war hero even, if she defected, but there is really nothing we can do about it. Before you start arguing again, listen. The Mizukage groaned. We are weak at the moment. Even putting them in the bingo book would be announcing our weakness only increased. We have to keep it quiet and not confirm anything long enough for the war to end, hopefully with enough casualties on each side to not bother us in the near future. The Mizukage hollowly chuckled, causing the atmosphere in the room to turn somber. Akachi noted some clan heads were not so discreetly glaring at the Mizukage, but the man didn't even spare them a glance. Anyway, despite everything, I know Rei has some attachment to the village, so we are not in immediate danger. For now, we will do exactly nothing. The Mizukage ordered with a tone of finality. The session then lasted for another 3 hours, discussing the late Team Downpour's weaknesses and strengths, their intentions and motivations for going rogue, even ways to get them into the fold again, with minor punishment, of course. Honestly, Akachi was bored out of his wits, something the Mizukage could relate to if Akachi's eyes were still working. Even Akachi, a civilian, knew no matter what the old fogies discuss, it was all just guesswork at best. After all, the only person in the room who knew enough about Team Downpour was the Mizukage, and he certainly was not very forthcoming with the details. Even Ichika ground her teeth in irritation every time she was asked about them, since she knew virtually nothing, much to Akachi's only amusement during the session. Alas, his work sucked, and he already came to terms with it long ago. Pakura nervously shifted, tightly gripping the kunai in her hand, as she watched a Wagakure border outpost from her team's hiding place. Thankfully, they were far away from the never-ending sands of the Land of Wind, and the forests were quite lush here. In the Land of Claw that was located between the Land of Rock and Wind. They were in the forests at the very borders between Claw and Rock, waiting for these mercenaries the Kazakage hired to deal with the border outposts, so the Suna army can march further into the Land of Rock's territory without being obstructed. Pakura had her own thoughts about some no-name mercenaries, however, and that was the source of her recent frustration. She was responsible for her team, and the hired kunais were already a half-hour late. The Kazakage won't be happy. We should be attacking right about now, not wait for latecomers. One of her men gruffly grumbled. Of do shut up Nekuro. Murano, the trap expert of the team, snorted at Pakura's second in command. Murano was also the only member of the team who knew who exactly was hired by the Kazekage. She, or rather her clan, was the one who introduced them to the Kazekage, after all. Something that only increased the suspicion of Pakura. Murano's clan was quite small and a new one. They were originally merchants specializing in seals and weaponry. Apparently, Murano's father had quite the position in Bairi Company before they settled in Sunagakure, for whatever reason the ferocious politician deemed enough to make Suna suffer his presence for. Then again, Sunagakure was in no position to refuse, since they brought a big reduction of merchandise cost from Bairi Company, which in turn gave Suna ninjas a big advantage in the field. Sadly, it also gave them quite a bit of political capital, and Murano's grandfather somehow found himself in the council. Not even a year after they settled in the village, and Murano proved to be elite jonin skill-wise. Pakura didn't trust their loyalty to the village more than she could throw them, honestly. Maybe we would be calmer if you finally told us who are the mercenaries. All we know is that they were hired through the Bairi Company. Our lives kinda depend on them, you know? Pakura dryly stated, hoping Murano would at least hint at their identity. Right now, the team was sitting ducks, and it would be only a question of time until they were found and hunted. Well, sucks to be you then, no? Murano just grinned happily, her eyes refusing to leave the outpost tower. Alas, my fun seems to end here since, look. She pointed at the tower, and instantly a huge explosion shook their world. Pakura suddenly found herself fumbling helplessly before falling onto her ass as her eyes widened, watching the big ball of crimson-red flames engulf the entire tower and its surrounding. Even from afar, she could feel the incredible heat, and a shudder went through her spine at the thought of actually being targeted by it. Sure, it was not as hot as her scorch, but the heat reached much farther than her bloodline ever could. Slowly, the crimson flames started receding and the ground stopped shaking. Her team started to recollect their wits from the spectacle they just saw when yet another explosion resounded from afar, then another and another, until the count reached 9, and even the earth couldn't decide in which direction to shake and instead was jerking from side to side, making even the now prepared Pakura having to spend quite some chakra to keep standing. The fuck is happening? Pakura thought, her stomach sinking when she realized every explosion came from the direction of IWA border outposts that were scheduled to be hit sometime next week by Suna ANBU. Her eyes flickered to Murano, who was still laughing like mad, but to Pakura's surprise, she was the only team of her team who managed to stand still through the world-shaking earthquakes. The woman didn't even look shaken, and it honestly made Pakura quite worried when she remembered she was supposed to be trained by the Bairi Company. What the heck is Bairi Company planning? Pakura narrowed her eyes. Murano was in no way just an elite jonin. The woman was solid S rank. When the trembling finally subsided and Pakura was about to give the order to retreat, a hand landed on her shoulder, almost making her jump in fright as she realized somebody managed to sneak up on her back. She slowly turned her head, only to be met with faceless darkness under the hood of a cloak so black, even the ANBU would moan in envy. Despite her various experiences and ability to suppress fear, Pakura knew she was scared. Something about the black figure, who was as if melting into the shadows, made her hair stand. She didn't even dare to peer into the faceless void under the hood, in an irrational fear it would suck her in. Killing intent. Her mind idly supplied. It was just so different from what she was used to. Killing intent should be malicious, angry, menacing, even disgusting, not just dark. The killing intent of the man was making her feel empty, apathetic, and cold. It's making me sluggish. Snap out of it, woman. Pakura's mind shrieked at her, but she just couldn't. This was far too different from what she was used to. The man suddenly lifted his hand from Pakura's shoulder, and Pakura gasped for air, instantly leaning on a nearby tree for support in order to prevent herself from a shameful display of falling from fear in front of her subordinates. The contract is fulfilled. Remind the Kazekage to send the money. A lifeless dark voice came from the hood, making Pakura's team take a step back at how eerie it sounded before the man simply vanished. 10 trained jonin-ranked ninjas were unable to spot how. He just blinked out of existence right in front of their eyes. Pakura and her team couldn't help but gulp, the intimidation tactics clearly working. What the hell was that? Nakaro quietly asked, still shaken from the cold and soul-wrenching feeling of the killing intent. That was Ray of Kiri, the leader of Yozora. Murano commented, making others' eyes widen when they realized the man who created a lake in the desert a few years prior was just in front of them. So that's why the Kazekage so readily accepted. Pakura mentally nodded. It was then she also noticed Murano being far too relaxed. No barely noticeable shivering, no veiled fear on her face, no flinchy behavior that could be seen in all of the members of her team. Pakura narrowed her gaze at the trap mistress of the team. She expected it and knows how to counter it. How? That feeling must be some new way of showing the killing intent, but why would Murano be able to counter it? Pakura pondered only for her eyes to narrow even further. Looks like I will have to be extremely careful of you, Murano. Anyway, I will talk with the Kazakage about the payment. Murano shrugged Pakura's suspicious gaze off. Not like she would in her team for much longer. After this, her father would be promoted even higher in the council, and she would become the head of the clan in his stead, meaning being holed up in the village. And look, he even destroyed 9 additional outposts as a gift for Sunagakure. She cheerfully exclaimed, seeing only further looks of fright when the ninjas finally remembered the 9 additional explosions. Murano couldn't help but roll her eyes. Looks like getting SS rank will be much easier than you first thought, won't it, Reisama? If only my oaf of father didn't volunteer our family to settle in Suna. She grumbled,